Paraspar-Lecture organized by the Office of Communication, Indian Institute of Science. Today we have a very well-known historian, Professor Rajan Gurukkal, who will speak on science, technology and knowledge economy. Before we begin, let me give you a brief introduction of the speaker today. Professor Rajan Gurukkal is presently Vice Chairman of the Kerala Higher Education Council. He is a historian, social scientist and author. After obtaining his PhD in Historical Socio-Economics from Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, under Professor Romila Thapar, he became a faculty of the Center for Historical Studies of the university. He was a visiting faculty at Humboldt University. He has worked in several important posts such as the Dean of Faculty, Academic Council member, Senate and Syndicate of many universities and social research institutes. He is former Vice Chancellor of Mahatma Gandhi University, Kottayam. He was Sundarajan Visiting Professor at the Center for Contemporary Studies, Indian Institute of Science from 2012 to 2016. He is currently the Vice Chairman of the Kerala Higher Education Council. Some of his books that he has written, he has authored are Cultural History of Kerala, Social Formations of Early South India, Sluice Trends in Kerala, Causes and Elevation, Rethinking Classical Indo-Roman Trade, Political Economy of Eastern Mediterranean Exchange Relations, History and Theory of Knowledge Production, and Introductory Outline, History of Kerala, Prehistoric to the Present, co-authored with Raghava Warrior. May I invite him to the dais, please?
Am I audible? It's not working. Good afternoon, everybody. The science, technology and knowledge economy need not be a new topic for you. Anyway, science and technology are terms which need no explanation. And knowledge economy also, these days everybody has a good idea about what it means. Maybe, but one is not quite clear how it works. And always there is this problem of having a gap between the commonsensical understanding of something and then the academically accessed analytical dimension of it. So this gap is what I would like to address. For example, knowledge economy and knowledge society. Generally, we don't make any differentiation of it. And also sometimes people talk about information society along with the knowledge society. So there you find information and knowledge are used interchangeably. And then generally people take it as a trend. Information culture is the trend of our times, or information society is the society that we live in, or same is the case with the knowledge society. Society is using knowledge extensively and therefore knowledge society. People today are heavily dependent on information, the data, and using data in a variety of ways. We are sorting data, classifying data, all with the help of software. All these would help us generalize that it's again a trend driven by the technology. And for everyday life, this understanding is enough. But when you come to the question, what is it actually and how it works, we require certain understanding at depth. And also you are familiar with some of the writings about the knowledge society as an indicator of the phasing out of the industrial society. A knowledge society as the post-industrial society. There is an argument like that. And also there are studies showing that knowledge society is only the latest version of the industrial society. It's about knowledge industry, and therefore it's only part of the industrial society. And again, people will extend it to industrial economy, or industrial economy and knowledge economy more or less the same, and things like that. Now when we are having diffuse intimations like this, to give an academic answer to the question, what do you really know about the way of characterizing the knowledge economy? How do we do that? So it requires a bibliographic roadmap, how the concept evolved and how people have been using these expressions, knowledge economy, information economy, in the scholarly circles. And finally, in what way one is able to link up this with the dominant economy of the world, which you all know is capitalism. How science is linked up with capitalism, how technology is linked up with capitalism, and such questions. So finally, see, we are able to define what is this thing called knowledge economy. So this is the outline of what I would like to discuss today. So science, technology, and knowledge economy. Yeah. Yes, I think this is the first one. Yeah, it's right. No, right. So when we define the topic, we have, as I just indicated now, terms like science, technology, knowledge economy. Science, I just take the very general working definition for my discussion, that science is explanation with proof. I just leave it there. Science as explanation with proof. Technology is the study of a process or a system, and it is different from engineering in the sense that it doesn't deal with the structure, composition, and working of an engine. It's the system which may be used for operating a machine. Anyway, technology is different from engineering, and you all know that. And I would differentiate technology in this way from science, that science is explanation with the proof and technology is a process that would influence science tremendously. Then knowledge economy, it has been taken for knowledge-based society. What does that mean and what is knowledge? So what is the meaning of knowledge-based society? I don't have to explain because it is knowledge using society. But ultimately the academic question would be, what is knowledge and then how is it related to economy? Knowledge is codified explanation. It's not information. Codified, classified, explicit category of the output of understanding. So knowledge is not just information. Now what is economy? Economy in its general academic sense refers to production, consumption and exchange. So when you use the term economy, immediately you presuppose the process of production and then consumption and exchange. And then irrespective of the fact whether you relate it to A or B, these three functions would be there. If you relate to knowledge, the immediate implication is that knowledge economy refers to production of knowledge, consumption of knowledge and exchange of knowledge. Hence our discussion pertains to the relation between what knowledge means and how its economy works with science and technology. I just refer to relations. For understanding the relations, it's important for us to know first what knowledge means. Knowledge means explicit, standardized and codified knowledge of demand in the economy. It implies that there is the dominance of something that decides what is to be called knowledge. There isn't anything called knowledge as a universally accepted category. So we have to ask the question, who decides what is knowledge? The dominant economy decides what is to be called knowledge. Anything is not knowledge. For example, the people in the forest, they have their own understanding of their surroundings, their everyday life, understanding of various objects that they use. They also have knowledge. But when narrated in the form of their stories, it becomes just a tradition for us. It becomes just a story. We don't call it knowledge. So that's the reason why we have to emphasize the thing that it is the dominant power that decides what has to be defined as knowledge. For understanding how the economy works with science and technology, it's important for us to know who produces knowledge and who consumes it. Scientists produce it, technologies turn it into process, products and services. Entrepreneurs use them for manufacturing products and services of demand. Societies and institutions consume them. Now, on demand is to be noted here. If there is no demand for what you identify as knowledge, it will cease to exist as knowledge in the society. For example, as scientists, you may talk about Newtonian physics and would treat that as pure science, fine, and also you might say that it is the science of my preference. But the moment you assert that that is the physics today, then physicists will quarrel, because there is only historical value for Newtonian physics. Because physics has gone from the certainty of Newtonian planetary dynamics to the uncertainty physics or certainty physics of the universe to the uncertainty physics of the universe within an atom. The quantum physics, physics of uncertainty and physics of complexity, whatever. So what I am trying to say is that a knowledge of very high tradition of acceptance need not necessarily be in demand today, and that will decide the market of it. If an institution is asked to offer fellowships for Newtonian physics, institutions may not come forward, but they would be ready to offer fellowships for doing research in quantum entanglement or quantum coherence. Fine, we are prepared to institute fellowships. These are changes decided by the demand of a particular time. Demand engineered by the existing power structure. Now, the entire process of scientists producing it, technologies turning it into process, products and services, entrepreneurs using them for manufacturing products and services of demand. They would produce only products of demand. Societies and institutions also would consume only such products, and their consumption rate would decide the rate of demand. All these are interrelated. In short, the relations mean the aggregate of relations in the production, consumption and exchange of knowledge. So when you talk about knowledge economy, it is the relations involved in the production, consumption and exchange of knowledge. Aggregate of relations as a system. Now, we make any aggregate intelligible by conceiving it as a system. A system becomes intelligible because we are trained in conceiving complexities and variables organized into a system, and that is the conceptual cognitive process we have undergone or we are still undergoing. So it's important for any academic thinking around our topic to start with systemic understanding, system. An aggregate of relations is intelligible only when conceived as a system. How do we define knowledge economy as a system? That's the fundamental question we have to raise. An economic system is defined as a mode of production. That is the conceptual or theoretical statement about economy as a system. Mode of production involves a structure made up of economic base and juridico-political come ideo-cultural superstructure. There is an analogy of a structure with base and then superstructure. This analogy is indicating the interconnections of both, interdependence of this. Economic base involves economic processes of production, consumption and exchange. Ideo-superstructure involves laws, state power, allied institutions, ideas and specific political institutions or cultural institutions like religion, etc. So, the term mode of production is a technical expression referring to these interconnections. They all bring together as a system, and then that becomes an intelligible category when we conceive the whole thing academically. So, the expression economic base and juridico-political come ideo-cultural superstition. Economy is at the base, and then there are related juridical processes, related laws of its own, and there is a power structure. It's political power, but dependent on the economic structure. It's the economic base which is supporting or engendering the political power structure. Then the cultural superstructure, where the very powerful one is religion. Even religion is not independent of these processes. Religion undergoes fundamental changes under the pressure of the economic base. That's the reason why religion is given place only in the superstructure. Religion is not a basic force. It won't be able to influence the character of the economy, the working of the economy, the structure of the economy. It is the structure of the economy which will govern the nature of religion. Culture involves social relations, institutions, practices, customs, entertainments, religious beliefs, rituals and rites. The base superstructure analogy shows the interdependence of the category. So, when you say knowledge economy, the system that gives you the picture of interconnections of various things would come to the context. The knowledge economy just cannot be a trend of the time or just an economy as such, but an overarching system with transforming influence on every aspect of human existence. Now, development of the concept of knowledge economy, a bibliographic roadmap. It was Daniel Bell who published the landmark study, The Coming of Post-Industrial Society, a venture in social forecasting. Now, he made a forecast on the basis of the then internet system, very crude in 1973, but Daniel Bell was able to anticipate the coming into being of a post-industrial society completely dependent on networking. Networking and then use of heavy data and developing tools for the analysis of the data, what we call tool-based data mining today. All this was anticipated by Daniel Bell. We will return to his thesis later. Then Manuel Castells wrote a book, The Informational City, Information Technology, Economic Restructuring, and the Urban Regional Process. That was his first study, published in 1989, but subsequently he elaborated the whole thing into 3 independent volumes. But in 1991, Andrew Feinberg published a book, Critical Theory of Technology, but nobody bothered about it. It was highly theoretical. That was not the only reason. The reason was that people were already caught up in the mesmerism of digital technology that was inflicting on. Digital technology was creating wonders, and people started talking about the future on the basis of the digital technologies. Andrew Feinberg actually thought about the political economy of digital technology, and he was very clear that it had to do something with the dominant economy of the globe called capitalism. He was clear that capitalism was drawing closer to technology and science, and change was taking place at the level of capitalism, not at the level of technology, pure and simple. Then Drucker PF published Post-Capitalist Society in 1993, but a very shallow work. It is a high-sounding title. Although he calls it post-capitalist, Drucker never paid attention to the structure and composition of capitalism. He had no idea about what capitalism really meant, but he knew that knowledge was becoming important. All this he expressed by describing the surface manifestations, and he interchangeably used knowledge economy, knowledge society. For him, it was just a trend, but he was the one who popularized the expression knowledge economy. And for that purpose, one has to be obliged to him. He popularized the expression, but at the same time rendered the commonsensical explanation and also universalized it. Schiller talked about digital capitalism networking the global network. He had some idea about the link between digital technology and capitalism, but was not able to theorize it. Now, Manuel Castell's volumes. First, in 1996, he published The Information Age, Economy, Society and Culture, Volume 1. The specific title of the volume, The Rise of the Network Society. The first volume highlights the economic and social dynamics of the information age and shows how the network society has now fully risen on a global scale. Then the second volume, Power of Identity. This volume deals with the social, political and cultural dynamics associated with the technological transformation of our societies with the globalization of the economy. Then third volume, End of Millennium. This final volume describes the crisis resulting from the transition from the old industrial society to the global network society. Now, Manuel Castells is a good anthropologist, somehow was not theoretically engaging with the issue. With the result, he was not able to offer any theoretical explanation to the process of transition from industrial society to the knowledge society, or he didn't emphasize knowledge but information, because he was really influenced by the huge data of the time and how people were depending upon the data with the help of digital technologies for making discoveries, for making inventions, and also for developing devices for everyday use. And he anticipated the development of artificial intelligence based on this. Artificial intelligence depends on data and then various layers of data, and how data are used to constitute information centers, and how information centers are integrated for further results, and so on. So that algorithm certainly requires theory. Your solid knowledge base always should be there for machine to interpret. But in the process, contribution to new knowledge was not much. Contribution to translation of knowledge, contribution to translation of existing knowledge was important. How knowledge could be translated for practices, and how artificial intelligence could facilitate that. Apart from this, you don't find the fundamental question addressed by the author. The fundamental question is the information technology structure. Can the information structure, can the information technology, or say digital technology, structure the economy of the time? If so, how did it happen? That question was not raised by Castells, and hence he had no answer to it. Bibliographic roadmap. Now, several urban economists like Porter, management specialists like Koch, Morgan, Florida, and Simi, and others. They in the 19th developed various aspects of Manuel Castells. Several others slightly later, sticking to Castells' concept of the information city, but focusing on externalities like innovative cluster, intelligent region, learning region, knowledge-based competitive city, and so on. So all these are based on the external manifestations like techno parks and information cities. That was happening phenomenally across the globe. All developing countries were having huge computer system parks and software industry developing like anything. Now revisit Bell and Castells. Several scholars began to think information technology as a marker of the end of the industrial society, as Daniel Bell postulated. They expanded the features highlighted by Daniel Bell in 1973. Some of them reinterpreted information age using the features described by Castells. The idea of information society and the new regional urban process became central. So they all concentrated on the external phenomena called development of say, computer centers and software industry, and then the extensive use of information by the society, necessitating information technology at the various levels. Now, the concept of post-capitalism. As I said earlier, P.F. Drucker had already talked about the phasing out of the industry and coming into being of, phasing out of the industrial capitalism and coming into being of knowledge economy. But he was not able to link properly, as I said earlier, knowledge with capitalism. Drucker's study has nothing to do with the question of the phasing out of capitalism. The phasing out of capitalism would mean the dissolution of the system that we just defined earlier. It's a system involving multiple functions and structural constituents. Their systematic dissolution has to be theoretically explained. Drucker never engaged with that kind of an intellectual task. His is a narrative of the surface features of the late 20th century society that depended on knowledge for its own, knowledge for its operation. He was responsible for making the expression knowledge society and knowledge economy very common. His study is highly descriptive and focused on the external manifestations of contemporary social and economic life. But a Marxist thinker like Slavoj Žižek, now who published during the COVID times a book that reached worldwide, Apocalypse, the End of the World or End of Capitalism. He thought the COVID virus was destroying the entire industries across the world, and capitalism would be getting a natural dissolution, and post-capitalist society would be coming into being. Now he is silent. I had written, in my own humble way, a small article in a Sage journal about how capitalist society would be minting money and facilitating accumulation of capital by using the virus vaccine. And every scientist knew that vaccine wouldn't work, but still that was the only medicine in the history of the world which states sponsored for universal purchase as a mandatory thing. Every state mandated its use. Never in the history of pharmaceuticals. That kind of profit accumulation never happened. That was sufficient for the capitalist society that we are going to explain to develop. So COVID only facilitated a higher kind of transformation of capitalist society rather than its dissolution. But a great revolutionary and very well-known thinker like Slavoj Žižek was not able to anticipate that. He thought, now technology is liberating, COVID is assisting. Digital technology is liberating and making grassroots democracy universalized. That was one. And digital technology was being supported by COVID virus. That was the final. And he had this apocalypse, end of the capitalist world, and then the coming up of the liberated world, emancipated world. So that's it. Proposers of the thesis of techno-capitalism. Now, here is the final thesis of ours. Now, as I mentioned, Feinberg, who published his work, Critical Theory of Technology in 1991, was not taken up seriously. Now became important in the early part of the 21st century. Andrew Feinberg was the first to identify the phenomenon of capitalism drawing closer to science and technology for the enhancement of accumulation. Now he predicted it. No, in fact, it was not prediction. He was able to analytically access the process of science and technology being manipulated by capitalism for proliferating patents and intellectual property rights. Likewise, Schiller, borrowing insights from Feinberg's critical theory of technology, viewed knowledge society as a new phase of capitalism and named it digital capitalism. Now he knew that capitalism was using digital technologies, and that he identified. And it was Michael Perelman who really understood the crux of the issue and became very angry. He was exasperated by the process. And that is clear from the very title of his book. Steal This Idea, Intellectual Property Rights and the Corporate Confiscation of Creativity. He was against the practice of corporates building up globally heavy experimental institutions. Every major city having a big corporate research lab doing research in various areas, and young brains are recruited by giving heavy salary. The function of each individual is just to develop a module, a small module, using their competence in high power computing. And then there is artificial intelligence driven master computer assembling them as new knowledge, new invention, and so on. This process is still going on. Youngsters are appointed on 24 hours basis. They are not able to enjoy leisure. They are answerable even when they are sleeping. A call will draw their attention. They'll have to open their laptop. They never close their laptop. They just start looking at it, and then they have to resolve certain problems. That is a kind of highly sophisticated enslavement of brilliant minds. Enslavement through electronic sophistication. That is going on. They do not know politics because they never got exposure to humanities and social sciences. They do not know social theory at all. They do not know the importance of May 1st. They are totally out. They don't read novels. They do not know what humanities mean, what social sciences mean. They have been trained like that. So they are amenable to be used along with artificial intelligence, along with the robots, and they communicate with the robots, and they become 100% apathetic and totally detached from social reality. Now, Michael Perelman is really angry. He is declaring that young minds are being subjected to the ruthless confiscation of creativity. Then Luis Suarez Villa, he has three important words: globalization of techno-capitalism, the political economy of corporate power and technological domination, techno-capitalism, a critical perspective on technological innovation and corporatism, then corporate power, oligopolies, and crisis of state. State power is declining. People generally don't understand that. There is going to be a world order completely governed by these huge experimental institutions run by corporates. And there would be a total transfer of bureaucracy into corporatocracy and complete destruction of democracy. That is the process underway. Now, the thesis of the latest phase of capitalism called techno-capitalism. What is? You have to close it. Okay. Anyway, we are almost towards the end of it. Is it? What this phase of capitalism is doing in the field of science and the field of technology, and what's going on in these huge experimentalist institutions. It's working. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I've already mentioned the latest phase of capitalism. Why this phase of capitalism is called techno-capitalism. Techno-capitalism, because it is heavily dependent on science and technology, and techno-capitalism is also called a knowledge economy because new knowledge continues its site and form of accumulation. Tangible asset or intangible asset is both commodity and capital for it. This is the first time that capitalism is having commodity and capital combined. Never in the history of capitalism it happened. And knowledge is both commodity and capital, because knowledge can be diversified, knowledge can acquire various forms. That would mean proliferation of commodities. Knowledge as such is a commodity, but knowledge can be the basis of the proliferation of multiple commodities. And in the process, there would be no problem for the continuous accumulation of capital for every industry. Now, in the earlier system, every industry will have a boom with a new commodity, but soon there would be a saturation point and then the decline would start. I mean, it's on the basis of this we have the law of diminishing utility, well known in economics, the law of diminishing utility. That law doesn't hold good anymore in the present day capitalism called techno-capitalism. The science and technology undergo changes very fast. Again, thanks to the pressure of this economy, technology is changing because of the technology based capitalism called techno-capitalism. Science is undergoing changes again because of the pressure of capitalism. And then technology and science being the basis for industries, every industry being a laboratory too, every industry being a combination of workers and scientists, and among scientists you have workers, among technologists you have scientists, so all are combined. And they started diversifying sciences and technologies in combination. So, you have today multiple science tech hybrid fields. Science is not pure science, but combined with technology. And various areas are nowadays called either technology or engineering, biomolecular engineering or graphene engineering or say nanotechnology. You have technology combined in science, and one is not able to make any distinction between science and technology today. they have now generated a series of hybrid areas. Now, just look at this institution itself. How many hybrid areas are having now centers here? This is not just an accidental development, but the direct contribution of the huge research establishments established globally and run by the corporates. No more universities and research institutions are deciding the future of the use of science and use of technology. And most of the institutions, premier institutions, are only now training young minds, training the most brilliant youngsters suitable for these huge global industries to employ. And they are there in all these institutions. This apolitical group is occupying the well-paid positions in such industries. We are not creating in the field of creating wonders in the field of technology or science. They are all coming from the major industries. Just one example, DuPont published in 2016 now their annual statement. They were able to acquire something like 270 patents just 1 year, and that was in just one area, and they had developed 12 areas, and the whole patent would come to about 2,600. This just patent production in 1 year. And intellectual property, huge accumulation of intellectual property. Where did this come from? It came from the youngsters. Now, they were allowed to publish papers, but after that they realized that they had no copyright. They lost the knowledge. They lost their right over it. The company is having control over everything. It is company's intellectual property. It is company's patent. That's the reason why Michael Perelman was offended, and he was calling this as confiscation of creativity. So that is going on now, and that is the basis of science. Artificial intelligence driven systems exploiting young people's innovativeness in a very sophisticated way, and then discarding them whenever it wants. And you don't find no person to be addressed with grievance. It's a system. You are reading just a message. It is our pleasure to make a total assessment of your contributions, and it is transferred to your accounts. Wish you a good future. It's a sophisticated language of language used for termination. Next day, your computer gate will not open. That seat will be occupied by somebody else. It's so mechanical. Or some robot would be sitting there, and if you go, the robot will ask you, who are you? What have you got to do here? So this is the embarrassing situation, highly alienating and totally different. So it constrains science to be technology. That's important. When somebody sends a paper to a high impact factor journal, the journal editorial would immediately send a reply, "If we are very happy to publish your piece, it's wonderful, but we will take some time because we have to send it for consultation." You see, I remember an experience narrated by Roger Zinn, the late Roger Zinn, when he visited Mahatma Gandhi University. Now, he was given Nobel Prize for discovering the biochemistry of how jellyfish goes fluorescent. He explained the biochemistry of that, and he got Nobel Prize. And he had already circulated this discovery among the peer groups and so on, but he sent it, the journal, well-known journal, and the journal sent him this reply. But Rogerson sent a reply saying that, no, I don't want you to retain my paper like that. And what consultation are you going to make without my permission? I know you want to take consultation for its application. You have to consult the thing with the molecular engineers. I am an engineer myself. I became a real engineer first because of the compulsion of my father. That story he narrated to me. His father wanted to make him an engineer. His father and he himself used to sit beside this seashore, watching the various small, sea life. And this jellyfish becoming fluorescent was a phenomenon that had attracted him, and he used to ask his father. And his reply was, oh, it's fine, you enjoy that. Don't ask such questions. I want to make you an engineer. And he became an engineer, satisfied his father. After the sad demise of his father, he returned to his childhood curiosity, and he explained the biochemistry behind the jellyfish becoming fluorescent. So he replied briefly to the journal, and he refused to agree with them. But the journal persuasively wrote a letter again to Zane, asking him to give the result of the application as well, and was ready to give some money. And he certainly received the seed money, and then in 6 months he made a wonderful, an amazing kind of application. That was, applying a dye to a human body that would make all abnormal cells fluorescent. So that was the clinical application. And DuPont purchased it. Now it's not available till, because there are various other techniques. And until they are exhausted, DuPont will not allow this to circulate. Well, this is going to be least expensive, but there are very expensive practices going around. This is how, things work. And it's one of the aspects of techno-capitalism. Forming into corporate houses, it has evolved a new form of techno-military industrial organization. It systematically impairs all democratic bodies and structures by transforming the state into crony. Every state in the world today is a crony capitalist state, very friendly to the system. If the state is not friendly, the system will see that that statesman is removed. Yeah, this is important. What these corporate research establishments are doing. Now, these are the areas developed by the corporate industries of knowledge. Science tech research is the most crucial field of corporate interest today, for the discovery turned innovations fetch them enormous profit. Corporate societies are giving birth to more science tech hybrid domains of research. Functional genomics with automated methods based on microarray technologies for analyzing gene expressions, use of X-ray crystallography and robotic crystallization procedures for determining gene structure in structural genomics, high field NMR spectroscopy for determining protein structures, DNA barcoding for species identification, layer by layer assembly of nanofilms, etc. are examples. Advanced bioengineered molecular processes, nanotech sensors and transmitters in high performance computing are among the new knowledge areas of enormous market value. Synthetic bioengineering, bioinformatics, biomimetic, robotic, biopharmacology and agrobiotech are promising fields of innovations for the imminent future. Techno-capitalist corporate organization, various aspects, I have already explained them. Corporate research establishments. Now this DuPont instance of 2013 is here. I refer to 2016 results. After the end, this is the situation. There will not be any change in the third world or developing countries. You have just a palatial structure of a recently emerged billionaire group, billionaire family. That is the house of one family, the Reliance family. And look at the Bombay slum. No transformation. Of course, they enjoy electricity. Many of these slums have color TVs. That's fine. And they constitute the political society in the sense when police goes into and then tries to take action, the police will never return. That is the kind of politics that they have. They constitute the political society. Whereas the party politicians constitute part of civil political activism. They constitute only civil society, constitution-based kind of society. Actual political society, as Partha Chatterjee said, can be visible among the ticketless travelers, wayside vendors, and then slum dwellers and so on, who break every license. They don't bother about what the state is demanding, because they all know that politicians would go to them at the time of election. So they control the people's representatives, and they constitute grassroots democracy. And they have the best people with resistance. They were the ones who got affected extensively the COVID, but least mortality rate there. But when the city people got infected, most of them were in critical conditions, and they were hospitalized. But none of the patients was hospitalized. A very few old people died. Negligible mortality rate. That is the resistance. But people have been talking about the filthy atmosphere there, and when they got the disease, all the people living in mansions were complaining that they were the ones bringing diseases. And some people thought that many of them would die, but nothing happened. They recovered naturally, but as cleaners, they were going to various places. Of course, they might have carried sickness, that is true, but people with no exposure to virus, because of over cleanliness and so on, had to succumb to death. It doesn't mean that this kind of life has to be justified. I don't mean that by saying that, but this situation is going to be further retained, and all kinds of expensive treatments that these hybrid sciences are going to develop would be completely inaccessible to these poor people, and only very rich people would be able to afford to that. But luckily, the nature would be taking care of them. They wouldn't require that kind of expensive treatment. This is the situation. Okay, I end up here. Thank you very much.
We'll take a few questions.
I think I was clear. I made sense to you, right? Sorry for the hoarse throat.
Thank you very much for the interesting talk. I have one question. You mentioned it a little bit in between. Is the linkage between the corporate or the corporate-driven economy to the apolitical young generation?
Yes.
You briefly mentioned about it, but is that deep-rooted problem where the more and more apolitical young generation is required or created by the corporate to drive, say, to make the IP rights and or that kind of wealth by themselves?
Yes, it's necessary for them to have apolitical people, because confiscation of creativity or innovativeness would be easy.
Yeah.
Others would be resistant to it. They would refuse to take the high salary and remain there. They would be able to go out and work, because digital technologies would allow that. Now, for example, this simple instance of Zuckerberg purchasing WhatsApp from Ian Combe and Brian Action. They were jobless people, actually.
Yeah.
They worked some time with Yahoo, and then it was in Yahoo that this young man, Ian Combe, met Brian, and they were jobless. Both of them once met Zuckerberg for a job in Facebook. But he said, at the moment, no vacancy, and people like you wouldn't be suitable. I have competed with. But it came to such a situation that these two young men were young, they were in the early 40s, developed WhatsApp. And Zuckerberg had to purchase it for $19.5 billion US. That's the kind of wonder which can create for thrown up people with competence. But people should have competency to do that. But this capitalist system will not allow that to happen.
Exactly.
See, X or Y will not get the entire secret of what he has been doing or she has been doing. See, a young girl being paid 3 crore rupees per year, Google instance. But she won't be able to understand the entire world of software in Google, because the youngster would be used, although at a CEO position, won't be able to understand. See, that kind of situation is there.
Yeah, that's very true, because if you take any corporate, you know the CEO, you know the top 1 or 2 people, and the whole show is run by a huge team which keep changing.
Yes, that's
so
it.
That will be in one place to the next place. So they do their bit of creativity and then disappear from there. That is added to their knowledge, and then all together we talk about them. So no need of publications. So recently many corporate driven projects, no need of publications.
Nothing.
What they need is just reports. So unfortunate actually. Thank you for your talk. Very nice talk.
Thank you.
Any more question?
Yeah, please.
So when we have so much of innovation being driven by, corporates and what they believe in this techno-capitalist knowledge economy, how do we bring back the curiosity and experimentation and creativity in research that can allow us to discover things that we might not have realized when so much is being driven by profits?
Yes. Indirectly you mean that curiosity is also being manipulated. There is natural curiosity, and we have our own curiosity in the academic as well. but this is being conditioned by certain courses, for example, certain courses available, and you are sometimes compelled to do certain courses as foundation courses, and naturally your faculty to develop inquisitiveness will get diverted to such fields, and finally you become perfectly opposite for the corporate interests. See, that's the thing taking place. You cannot have innate kind of curiosity. For example, a person hailing from a very poor family in a colony like atmosphere, his childhood curiosity might be to discover a remedy for this kind of life, and he would have certainly read that kind of works and so on, but being very brilliant, he comes to a stage where he doesn't get any time to develop his interest in that kind of a field. He knew that there is a way out, but that way out has to be planned, and then a lot of time has to be spent on it. Or any problem, people living in brackish water area, but waiting for potable water, they don't find that available. It's simple technology which can store rainwater, but no storage will just remain there. It's marshy area. How to develop a storage structure which can this simple technology, but no time for an engineer to work with it. And see, this engineer understands that high power computing is important, and then he is able to develop interest there also. Finally, he becomes very important in that field, and then in a miraculous kind of situation, one fine morning he becomes not just a millionaire, he becomes a billionaire, because his small package is purchased by a billionaire by giving a few billions. Here you kind of a mysterious kind of economy where it is the buyer who decides the price, and the seller has no point to bargain, because seller is partly unconscious hearing the price openly offered. Then with shivering hands, he or she will accept that. See, that kind of thing is there on the one side, and on the other you find very many very disappointed kind of people. They are being thrown out by the system, and then they find they are not able to do anything, because their language got completely transformed, their scientific practice has become totally different, and then even if they wanted to continue that, it's all high instrumentation based, capital intensive, is not able to use his expertise. If one A or B has been continuously working with high field NMR spectroscopy, he spent all time with it. He knows only the language of spectroscopy, and he developed his faculty to read it, to interpret the result and so on. What he will do when he is suddenly back to his village, that see the mechanism there. See, at very young age you are pruned, and in some way, unless you are in the field of digital technologies, your return will not be helpful.
Thank you.
Any other question? I have a question.
Yeah,
So, how would one escape being part of this economy? We know that we are part of we are fully aware that we are part of this knowledge economy.
Yes.
How do we escape that?
I have no answer, because it is such a powerful system. To get out of it is very difficult, because from A to Z things are being controlled and manipulated by the system. At least universities were there to produce free thinkers, critical intellectuals. Now critical thinking means you think critically to confront problems in molecular biology or graphene engineering or things like that. In nanotechnology, you develop nanotech sensors and transmitters and ask critical questions there. That is critical thinking. You cannot develop critical thinking independent of this. So, see there you find some kind of a situation where a big corporate hand is stretched and we are all resting there. If the hand is withdrawn, you just fall down helplessly, miserably. Yeah. But many people will ask, why should one withdraw? You are paid well, don't think about others. This is even when you have to retire without any retirement benefits, you are paid excellently well. But freedom is a totally different thing. Some children these days, I am talking about very brilliant ones, very high scorers in say a GRE and all that, and they get excellent fellowship abroad, particularly in USA. But what is the situation there? You are compelled to produce results. Always you are under tension, however brilliant you are. And certainly you work, you produce results, because you cannot just come back, because it's a shame. So you sustain there with heavy work, hard work, and finally, okay, you are back, of course with certain training. But if you take up a job there, for quite some time you are under threat. Periodic assessment, every assessment puts you in anxiety. Having spent for about 30 years or so under tension, what would be the fate? You will not be able to understand critical thinking, even when somebody says about it. Yeah.
Any last question? Okay, I think we don't have any more questions.
Yeah, we can only hopefully think about freedom and enjoy it. Real freedom is drawing away from us. That is my feeling. I'm not a pessimist though. Okay.
Thank you, Professor Gurukkal, for this brilliant lecture. It's always a pleasure listening to you. I am sure it has unpacked many, interesting conversations that we will have outside the lecture hall. Thank you very much, and thank you everyone for coming in this rainy day. We have a small token of appreciation. Sandeep, come. My token of appreciation.
Yeah, it is. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you. We meet in another lecture, another day.